that's, I put it, I think it's just here, I never think about it.
Enjoy that conversation.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Scott Norelius. I work for Camp back here at WSU Long Beach, and I spend most of my time out today. One of the things that I get to do is watch the refuge. You probably remember that we've taken an old dike out of Lewis and Porter Point. Well, this is Lewis Creek. The Jonas Road, Bear River, and this goes out to point over here. So we're able to look at vegetation changes over time. This used to be all very wheatgrass. Now it's marsh plants, tufted hairgrass, sea grass, pickleweed, things of that nature. This is just about 45 degrees of the old dike. This is where the Lewis fish ladder was. And this is looking north toward the Clam Management. Again, the tufted hairgrass is the yellow stuff in here. Some algae and Kathleen would know the black stuff in the mud. The refuge has been a little concerned about freshwater plants. We've wondered how the patterns of plant life changed over time with inundation of salt water. This is looking up Porter Creek at low tide. You can see some of the canary grass in here and along there. This is the same area, Porter Creek, at high tide. You see how far that saltwater inundation goes back into the wheat canary grass, caused the change in salinity in the soil, resulting in a change in vegetation types. This is the North Bay, Cedar River. You see the peninsula out here in the background on the horizon. This is Goose Point, Toke Point, and Cedar River. I started working for Kim in 2008. I told them then, my first trip to Cedar River, I hated the place. We've been up there twice this month. Right in there is where Goose Point Oyster Company just abandoned a grow-out bed, a fattening bed, because of the number of shrimp. In 2015, we documented over 300 juvenile burrowing shrimp per square yard in that particular area right there. Now across the Cedar River, just to the east of Toke Point, this is Coast Company's longline beds. On this side, the east side of the Cedar River, shrimp numbers are closer to 80 or 100 juveniles per square yard. And just across the river, like I said, over 300 per square yard. That's one of those areas that, like Kathleen was saying, where you take a step and you go to your knees unless you're quick or you're wearing mud boots. On this side, it's only, say, 80 shrimp per square meter, juvenile shrimp per square meter. So it's not quite as soft. So they can't grow the oysters on bottom culture because of the shrimp. So they're using the long lines. These long lines look pretty manicured. They're more oysters per area. But when the shrimp get too populated, then
Let's see, I'm gonna have to end it.
the state starts sinking into the ground. It will not hold up the water lines anymore. If you zoom in just a little bit,
Let me, I gotta get out of here first.
this doesn't show very well, but you can see most of these holes are shrimp holes. There's some cockles in there, some worms. We don't have the worms in this area. We have in other areas. So most of these holes you see in here are shrimp holes.
They're little herring tracks.
There's also some heron tracks in there, but they don't show up very good on this wall.
Okay.
You think there's heron out there feeding on the fish that live in the burrows, the shrimp burrows. Big gobies, sticklebacks, and stuff like that.
I'll get that.
Okay. There we go. So a drone's a really good way to get out there and see what's going on and don't want to get yourself lost in the mud. County commissioners were all concerned about Washaway Beach. They were a different perspective of what's happening at Washaway Beach. So I took the drone up there. This is a different view of Washaway Beach. The highways. That was too quick. The highways there in the background. This is the old neighborhood. See how the logs and other debris wash up on the shore and wash out towards the highway. And when you run out of work to do, you can also always assess your roof and gutters. Okay, that's all I got.
Our next speakers are going to be about clamming, but I first want to take just a little bit of time to introduce a few people. In particular, if you're an MRC member, will you raise your hand and just wave a little bit so people can see who the people are who do all of this stuff putting together. So thank you all. And our elected officials, I see Dean. You want to raise your hand, and Frank, and where's Brian? He took off. Okay. That's the way you guys are sometimes. Next, I want to introduce Kia Bernhardt and Courtney Hagan, they're the coordinator people for the MRC. So a lot of the good work that you see done here, announcements in the paper and all of that stuff, they do that. So why don't you stand up and look pretty for a minute. And is there anybody else Matt Winters is here from the paper, and I don't know who else. So let's proceed with clamming, guys. Dan and Zach are going to do their dog and pony show for a little bit, and then I'm going to read a couple of letters from Tom Downer and Randy Dennis about what clamming means economically to
Mayor Castanelli is here too.
Oh, I forgot Castanelli. Raise your hand. Mike Castanelli is also an elected official.
So if you're trying to make me nervous by introducing all these guys at work. I'm just going to spend a few minutes today talking a little bit about razor clam management. For those of you who haven't heard me talk before, I'll talk a little bit about what we do. I'm going to kind of center it around Long Beach.
Forward, that's your
Okay.
laser.
Okay, so we'll figure that out. And we'll talk a little bit about what we went through with the MOACAS, and then Zach's going to tell you a little bit more about the science that we do with the MOACAS, and a little more detail about that. And then I think if we could save our questions after, I think we've got some letters to read, and then we'll answer any questions you have. That'll work out fine. Let's dive into this. So we had a season, and it's been a tumultuous season to say the least on the Washington coast for razor clamming, and it all was a result of the MOACAS that razor clams are fine, populations are doing well on most beaches. We just had a real hard time on some of your beaches, especially this beach, to get you out there to do any digging. So let's see if I can do that myself. There we go. So I want to place myself in the agency a little bit and give you an idea of the people that I answer to and how it works. This is a policy that the Department of Fish and Wildlife, or the Fish and Wildlife Commission provided for razor clam management a number of years ago. The commission's a 9-member group that's appointed by the governor that oversees the Department of Fish and Wildlife, provides policy guidance for all manner of fisheries and hunting activities that we do. And we're asked to follow that policy. We go back to the commission from time to time if we want to make significant regulation changes that might need to be made. But in general, with razor clamming, what they ask us to do is to manage the razor clam resource on all coastal beaches for recreational use, with just an area on the Little Paw Spits reserved for commercial use. I'm not going to talk about the commercial fishery today, but if you have questions about it, I'd be happy to answer those. We're asked to protect public health and safety, to manage the resource, in other words, the razor clams, to maintain stable and healthy populations, to do our best to maximize recreational opportunity, to provide a quality recreational experience, and then to independently manage razor clams on 5 different beaches. Clay Lock on the north coast, and I'll show you a map in a minute. We do that in cooperation with Olympic National Park because it falls within Olympic National Park. Mock Rocks, Copalis, Twin Harbors, and Long Beach. And then this is kind of this is where a lot of the work comes. Well, considering the pertinent interactions of seasons, effort, opportunity, and tribal allocations, and then provide for that consistent commercial fishing opportunity that doesn't conflict with the recreational fishery. So that's our marching orders, and we do our best to go forward with that. I'm in the fish program of the Department of Fish and Wildlife. I have several folks above me, including our assistant director. His name is Ron Warren. You're probably familiar with him. He was once my boss as the regional program manager. Now he's our assistant director in fish. And then above him is our director, Jim Unsworth. And then Jim reports to the Fish and Wildlife Commission director. So these are the beaches that are mentioned in that policy that we work on. The Clay Lock Beach to the north, that does fall within Olympic National Park. The Mock Rocks Beach, that's north of Aberdeen. The Copalis Beach, that is just south of that. These are all divided by pretty major geographical breaks. The Copalis River divides Copalis and Mock Rocks. Obviously, Clay Lock is way up here, divided by the Quinault Indian Reservation in between. Twin Harbors Beach, the north side of that is Grace Harbor, the south side of that is Little Paw Bay, and then the Long Beach Peninsula with Little Paw Bay on the north end and the mouth of the Columbia River. Technically, it goes to the mouth of the Columbia River, but really the razor clam beaches pretty much end at North End, and you're all familiar with that. And then the Little Paw Spits, and that's not really very accurate. The Little Paw Spits is a much bigger area. At the mouth of the bay is where we allow commercial harvest of razor clams. So those are the areas that we work on. It's about 55 miles of razor clam habitat. And when you think about razor clams are found along the Pacific coast, all the way out to the Aleutian Islands and down into Northern California. And if you look at populations all along that range, we're living in pretty much razor clam central. Some of the best and most dense populations compared to those other areas are generally found here. In the Cook Inlet of Alaska, there's some pretty good razor clam digging, and some of you may be aware of that, although if you follow that at all recently, those populations are in steep decline. They're having a lot of issues along the beaches on both the west side of Cook Inlet and on the east side in that area. I've spent some time working with Alaska Department of Fish and Game. It's a totally different environment. It's very mucky. Times aren't very deep. There's bedrock down below. They call it mucking. You can just reach your hand down in some cases and just muck the clams right out. So very different in some regards. Okay. Oh, I have a slight thing. There we go. So I'm going to take you back one season just to remind you where we were. Not this season, but the season before in 2015. And this is just the number of clams harvested, the number of digger trips. That's one person going clam digging one day. These are our estimates of digger trips, harvest, and then the daily catch on average during that entire period, and the total number of days that we had open on each of these beaches. So you'll recall in 2015, we started the season with the Moa Castle problems. It actually started the season before that. in the spring of 2015, when we suddenly had to close all the beaches with high levels of domoic acid, almost to the day, 2 years ago, that we had to do the same thing this year. Levels were actually quite higher than they are now. I'll show you a graph of that in a moment. And that persisted through the summer months, into the fall, and most beaches didn't open until 2016, with the one example, or with the one outlier was Copalis Beach, opened on Christmas Eve 2015. So we weren't able to get beaches open as those razor clams slowly lost the toxin that they picked up back in the spring of 2015. And that's one of the things you need to keep in mind when you think about domoic acid and razor clams. Razor clams are notorious for binding domoic acid up in their fat tissue of the meat, not in their gut. We're testing the meat only, and it takes them time, and sometimes longer for some reason than others, to lose that toxin out of their system. So that's what we struggled with between the spring of 2015 and when these beaches finally opened. Long Beach didn't open until, I think it was next in line, January 7th, if I'm right. Mock Rocks was later in February. Twin Harbors did not open at all that season. Claylock also remained closed. So it was also a bit of a difficult season as well. And you'll recall that at Long Beach we did get, even though we didn't start till January 7th, we did squeeze in 94 days by doing something we haven't done in a long time. I started working for Department of Fisheries back in 1980, transitioned to Department of Fish and Wildlife, had been with razor clams most of that time. There was about a 10-year period where I worked on rockfish. But in my entire career, we've never done something like this, where we opened Long Beach every day. Like the old days when it was open 9 months out of the year, very similar to what's done in Oregon. You pick a day, you look at the tide, you decide when you want to go, and you were allowed to go digging. And that happened from we didn't do it right out of the blocks because we wanted to make sure toxin levels were going to remain low, but once we were confident about that, it was around the first part of February, we ran that, and then through the first part of April, if I'm not mistaken, at Long Beach only. Every day digging, we got to decide when to go. We found people digging clams on some pretty minor tides, tides that I never would have expected people to go out and dig razor clams on, but especially on the north end of the peninsula, where you do get a lot of beach exposure, even on some lesser tides. Okay, and then now we'll move ahead to this season. Kind of a similar story where we started in the fall of 2016, and we told you that we had some of the strongest populations of razor clams we'd seen in Long Beach in over 25 years. We're looking forward to a really great season, planning ahead to even consider doing some of that digging everyday routine and just really go at it. And you'll see in a moment in the graphic that it was the first part of September we started to see more and more of the diatom pseudonychia that Zach's going to tell you about. And we saw razor clams begin to pick up domoic acid levels, exceeded the action level, and there were no beaches, the two southern beaches were not able to open on the October, at the beginning of the season. That did not seem to affect Copalis and Mock Rocks. Those beaches, well, they had a little additional domoic acid and razor clams that did not exceed the 20 part per million action level, and those two beaches opened on time. Long Beach and Twin Harbors were delayed. The toxin this last fall seemed to come from the south. Zach, I think, is going to tell you a little bit more about that as well. Well, Oregon's beaches were hit even harder with much higher levels. As you're likely aware, Oregon's beaches also remain closed today to razor clam harvesting. Even just on the other side of the Columbia River, there's been no digging down there. Twin Harbors beaches finally did open, and then we ended up having to close it again, and then we opened it again, and then we had to close it again. There were two different instances like that at Twin Harbors. And now with the season at an end, we got 46 days in total at Twin Harbors. Copalis and Mock Rocks had fairly normal seasons with 33 and 35 days. And the one thing I skipped over earlier that if we were in Aberdeen or in Ocean Shores, we'd certainly be talking about at more length. But at Copalis and Mock Rocks and Claylock, those are the three beaches where there are treaty governments that have fishing rights on those beaches, and we're required by treaties and the federal determination of those treaties to share razor clam populations 50-50 with the Quinault tribe at Copalis and Mock Rocks and the Quinault tribe, the Hoh tribe, and the Quileute tribe at Claylock. So you're always going to see fewer days on those beaches. If we weren't sharing 50-50, you could pretty much double those number of days and you'd see how much recreational digging there would have been. So that's always the reason for fewer days on those beaches. There's always going to be, because there's 50% of the clams that we do not have access to. One other thing that you'll want to see here that is unusual, and that you look back at a lot of our data, and you're not going to see 20.6 clams per person, and it's really weird to see that, but it was even weirder to drive down the beach at Long Beach during those 6 days that we allowed the 25 clam limit, and see people, especially on the north end, where digging is always going to be better, and digging was great. People coming up with, they couldn't even fit them all in one bag, they bringing them up in 2 bags, and complaining about all the clams they got to clean, and a lot of smiles too. So, and we did that because that was a big internal discussion at the agency. We did that recognizing that it was an incredibly unique situation. We knew we had this stupendous population that we measured during last summer's stock assessment I'll tell you about in a minute. We knew that we had a beach that was closed for a long time. We knew that this community needed as much economic boost as we could help provide. We also knew that we're running out of time. We're headed into the summer season when razor clam digging is not open because the clams need to spawn, and after they have spawned, they're skinny little buggers and nobody's going to want to dig them. And we also have the issue of snowy plover and interactions that we had to try to avoid as best we could on the north end of Long Beach. And so we went to this 25 clam limit. Now there were a lot of people on the south end of the beach. What I ran into, I worked both the Saturday and Sunday, the big days. There was, on Sunday we had 17,800 diggers out on Long Beach, our best estimate. That's a record single day we've ever measured that I can find in our records. 17,800 people is what we measured at Long Beach on Sunday, that last Sunday in April.
That's about everybody in the day.
And then, you know, the interesting thing about that is, conversely, at Mock Rocks, the beach that was open there, did not have a 25 clam limit. And one of the things we were concerned about is if we raise the limit on one beach, are people that are on these other beaches going to get confused? And that didn't happen. We didn't have people come up and say, well, I thought I was on Long Beach. In front of the Ocean Shores Inn. You know? And that didn't happen. So that was a good test for us. But at Mock Rocks, on that same day that there were 17,800 people on Long Beach, we broke a record at Mock Rocks, which is a smaller beach. We had 11,300 people. So I think people just got crazy about razor clams and went at it. Give you an idea, just to look back into history just a little bit, these are the number of days that have been open on each beach for the last 10 or so seasons. And you can see Long Beach has had some pretty good digging, but also some years where digging wasn't so good and there weren't as many days. Twin Harbors has been a little more consistent through those years. And Copalis and Mock Rocks, a lot of variation. We've seen particularly strong populations these last 4 years, and that's reflected easily in the number of days of digging. And the economic value of this fishery is not lost. The agency recognizes that. You'll see that in a lot of our publications. It's often highlighted as one of the more successful fisheries and one of the fisheries that does generate a lot of income to local communities in along our coastal area. The bars represent the number of digger trips, and then the line represents the estimated value. That value, you know, I'm a biologist, I'm not an economist. We use a number, a multiplier, economic multiplier that was produced by a study that NOAA paid for, that the University of Washington, a group of marine economists did back in 1997. It's probably a little outdated even today. I say 1997, 2007, excuse me, 2007. It's 10 years now since that's been done, but you can see that $25 million would be a fairly average season, and these last few seasons as much as $40 million, and people that come into your community and communities up the coast and spend money as they go. So we'll talk a little bit about the management that we do around razor clams and domoic acid. We are working very closely with the Department of Health. I'm disappointed they can't be here today to speak for themselves, but one of the things we do is we collect the samples that they process, and we take our direction on domoic acid from the Department of Health. They're the human health experts, And before every single opener, whether we know there's a problem or not, we're always out sampling on each beach. And depending on the beach, it's either 3 or 4 samples per beach. Each of those samples has to be 12 clams that are all adult size. We do 2 collections that have to be 7 to 10 days apart, with the last collection coming as close to the opener as we can to ensure that the clams that people are digging are as close to the clams that have been tested. And that often means late notice on when we're going to open. We hear that complaint a lot. Why can't you tell us sooner that it's going to open? And the reason is we don't get these final numbers till just before it opens. Yeah, sometimes it's as much as a week, but sometimes, depending on tides, it might be only 3 or 4 days. So that's what we do with the Department of Health. They do the analysis, we do the collection, and we get the data back. And this is just a little bit of the timeline of what I've kind of mentioned as I've gone along here. This is March 2015 when we saw a sudden increase in demolic acid. These are all Long Beach razor clam numbers. This is, again, demolic acid and razor clam meat, not in the gut tissue. You can see it went up over 110 at Long Beach, and it took all this time to slowly drop out. The toxin itself was gone pretty well before we got into summer. But it took all that time for that toxin to drop out, and we finally reopened the fishery in January. And then for the rest of the season, it remained good. We had done our stock assessment, getting ready to reopen, popped back up, not as high at all, but it still persisted in losing its toxin until we thought we had it open in March, popped back up on the very next sample, and in July we had it open. We got those 11 days in, and then the Pseudonychia cells, again, coming from the south from Oregon, came back, and we jumped up to 41. The most recent sample that's not here was almost exactly the same level that came in just last week. So the good news is it's not here, and maybe it won't take so long to get down in the fall, but we're still not out of the woods yet, and Zach will give you a little bit of an idea of where we're at with that. And I'm going to show you some slides from the Department of Health in a little bit. They're not here, but they did provide a presentation they asked me to make. There's 5 or 6 slides, and there'll be just a little bit more information in that. So how many clams are out there to harvest? How do we do our stock assessment? Some of you have seen this, some of you haven't. But we do a pretty thorough coast-wide stock assessment, and we use a technique that we call the pump area method, where we're liquefying the sand using a water pump that's pumping water up from the surf into an aluminum ring that's exactly a ½ square meter in area that settles into the sand. Every clam that's there floats to the surface. We're able to count those clams and include them in our sample. And each of those rings is pumped for 3 minutes minimum. And as I said, the clams float right to the surface. They're measured and then returned to the beach. And so when we're done, we leave the beach with our data in our hands. The clams are left behind to be there to be harvested in the future. Every now and then that water wand will hit a clam dead on, and those clams generally aren't there next year for you to dig. The local Seagull that's usually hanging around might get to take that one home for dinner. And we do that along a transect. And these transects are randomly located. They're about a mile apart. Again, on each beach, it takes 1 day to do that transect. Along that transect, from the top of the clam beds, as far out as we can go, and ideally that would be 600 feet. Every 50 feet, we do 6 of those aluminum rings. And we go north or south, depending on, we have a computer-generated sampling plan that tells us on each transect which way we're going to go, and it always varies it. A lot of randomness included in this. And so again, when we leave the beach, we have our data in our hands. And we used a method in the years gone by that was altogether different, that required us to mark clams, leave them behind, come back 2 weeks later and dig a portion of the marked clams to the unmarked clams. And one of the problems is we would see seagulls coming in as we were cleaning up after marking those clams, and they figured out where they're marked or where they're planted, and they'd be digging up that hole and taking off with our data for dinner. So we found a new method back in '97, and we're happy with it. I could show you a video. I'm not going to do that. We have a video online. It's on our website. It's also on YouTube. But it will describe to you and show you some video of how that's actually done. And if you're interested, you could, if you just went to Google and typed WDFW razor clam stock assessment. I think you find it, but again, it's on our website as well. I'm going to show you a little bit of results from last year, and I'll tell you that we're going to start this work